Hello and welcome to CanSpace webinar series featuring top experts across various fields. My name is Artashis Tumanov and I'll be your host today. Just to kick things off, let's meet. Where is everyone connecting from today? Please feel free to use the chat below, now that it's working for everyone, to let us know where people are connecting. Very curious to see. Vancouver, Montreal. Perfect. More Vancouver, Yukon, Ottawa, Toronto. Nice one. Coordinates. I won't be able to figure that one out. Sunshine Coast, good to see you. Wow, so many people on the West Coast. Wonderful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, listen, thank you to everyone who's joining us live. And for those watching this as a recording through social media channels, CanSpace has been providing enterprise-level web hosting solutions for over 20 years. The company caters specifically to Canadian individuals, businesses, and government organizations. It is also the leading domain registrar in Canada. Today's event is dedicated entirely to WordPress. So if you use or plan to use WordPress, stay tuned to learn some of the top advice from our panel of expert speakers. Today with us, we have Kirsten Starcher. She's an independent contractor at Outside in the Sun Productions. She began her online career in New York during the dot-com boom. I remember those days. And since then, has been involved in just about every aspect of web design, development, and content creation, plus a short diversion playing bass in a touring rock band. So today she's also our musical guest. I'm just kidding. Totally fine. Currently, her focus is on WordPress, front-end development, e-learning, and being human, something that we need more of. Kirsten will share how to tackle unexpected WordPress challenges like a pro, ensuring smooth sailing even in tricky situations. Also with us today is Pavel. He is a published, actually maybe he will expand on that in his introduction, and certified professional penetration tester and security auditor. He's the co-founder and CEO of SB Software. It's a cybersecurity firm located in Montreal. Pavel will talk about the best practices to fortify your WordPress against potential threats, keeping your data and visitors safe and secure. And Corey is one of Canada's top search engine optimization specialists, representing SEO Plus Digital Marketing Agency. His initial guest appearance in our previous webinar left such an impression on everyone that we absolutely had to invite him back. And Corey returns to unlock the secrets of skyrocketing your WordPress website visibility on search engines, driving more traffic, and boosting your online presence. So thank you, panelists, for being here today. Lovely to have you. So the format of today's webinar, following each speaker's presentation, there will be a 10-15-minute Q&A period, giving you, our attendees, a chance to ask the speaker any related questions. There are a couple of ways to ask a question. You can either type your question by clicking on the Q&A button, not chat, Q&A button located below on your Zoom screen, or you can ask a question verbally by raising your hand by clicking on Raise Hand button, also below. I will see all your questions and requests in the order in which they are received, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. Okay, let's have some fun and kick things off with Kirsten.
Thank you very much. Let me get my screen share rolling here. How's that? All right. So I'm going to be talking to you today about how to stay calm and troubleshoot your WordPress site. So a little bit about me. Yeah, I've been working on the web since there was a web, and I have about 25 years of experience. For about the past 10 or more years, I've been focusing mainly on WordPress. I've been calling myself a front-end developer, but I like doing a lot of other things too. I like doing content as well. I've been getting more into e-learning lately. I dabble. And as you can see, I clearly take this sort of thing very, very seriously. And I really enjoy professional photo shoots. So I got an undergraduate and a master's degree in computer science in the mid-90s. And there they taught me to program in languages like Prolog and Lisp, Pascal, C, and C++. I built multimedia projects in Macromedia Director. I even wrote assembly language code for a PDP-11, which nobody was using anymore back then, even when I was a student, but the professor had refused to upgrade his own skills, which were from the 70s. And so he forced us to go through his process that we would never be able to use for anything. So if I was going to put most of that on a resume, I would just get laughed at because it is all so outdated. So what was the point? What did I actually get out of all those years and all that stress and all those tuition fees? I came out of it with a process for troubleshooting, an understanding for how to break a problem down into manageable parts and to translate abstract concepts into real-world tasks. So this is going to be a fairly abstract talk because we can't get into all the specific technical issues or programming errors that could possibly affect your site. It's more about your mental approach to the problem, your mindset, and your strategy. So I'm aiming more at kind of people trying to maintain their website that they've cobbled together or somebody else built for you. You might not be that familiar with it. Maybe you're a new developer who's just kind of trying to get into WordPress and figure things out. If you're an advanced developer, you're probably going to be familiar with all this already, but there may be something in here that gives you some perspective. So your site is down. First, let's deal with the feelings of panic and anxiety. I'm going to be talking mainly about kind of sudden, unexpected, stressful problems. The same techniques will apply to things like troubleshooting a minor CSS glitch on your site. But in those cases, you're usually dealing more with kind of internal pressure and frustration, not so much this impending sense of doom. So the first thing to remind yourself is this is not personal. It's not happening to you. It's just a thing that's happening. It's not about you. The first thing that tends to happen is the stories we tell ourselves about, how terrible this is. You're going to lose customers. You're losing clients. It's going to ruin your career. Everyone's going to hate you. You've made a terrible mistake and you regret it. But you don't actually have to believe everything that you think. It's sort of just your mind is propagating these ideas, and they don't actually all have to be true. Are people actually in danger of dying from your website being down? It's a good thing to remind yourself. I doubt that anyone here has a site that is, keeping a hospital system up and running. Like probably things are going to be okay. If you've got, customers or clients coming to you who are upset and are anxious, you can just reassure them that you're aware of the problem and you're on the job. Usually they just need you to know that they're worried and that you're on task, and then hopefully they can stay out of your way. So sometimes it's obvious what caused a problem, like you just updated your WordPress plugins and suddenly you have no site. When it's not obvious, you have to retrace your steps, which is like looking for your lost keys. So with your site, you go, when did you last know it was working? Have you made changes recently? What has happened since the last time it was working? Did you maybe update the plugins last week and a problem is only showing up now? Could somebody else have made changes? Has something about the environment changed? Like, server updates or your domain name didn't renew. I mean, there is the possibility of a hack, but I'm not going to get into that too much here. We're just looking more at kind of routine failures. When the pressure is on, there's a temptation to jump in and just do everything that you think might fix the issue all at once. But if you do that, how will you know how to fix it the next time it comes up? What you might end up doing is introducing new problems on top of the one that you've already got. And so now you have this cascading effect of bugs and changes and introductions. And now you have so many things to deal with that, that you hardly know where to start. So change one thing at a time. I count restoring a backup as one thing. And you do have backups, right? Like that is probably more important than many of the tips that I'm going to give you, is having regular backups, preferably daily. You can install a plugin. There's a ton of WordPress plugins that will do regular backups that you can have sent off-site. We can talk about that in the Q&A, or you can contact me for specifics later, but it is vitally important. So it doesn't do you a lot of good just having somebody say, the site is down or there's an error. You need to get complete error messages and the exact behavior that leads to the problem. Does the problem happen on every single page of the site? Does it only happen when you do a certain thing? So you want to narrow it down as much as you possibly can. If someone else is telling you about the problem, make sure you can replicate the issue yourself, because it's very hard to troubleshoot a problem that you can't see. So in WordPress, you want to learn about what types of problems are most likely to appear at each level. The usual suspects here are your theme, your plugins, the server that you're hosting on, or your domain name. If Chrome is telling you that it can't find your site, then it's not really going to be an issue with the theme or the plugin, because you're not even able to connect to WordPress at that point. It's more likely to be some issue with your domain name. Sometimes you can pinpoint where the problem is within seconds. Sometimes it's not even your responsibility. I have had clients call me all upset that their site was down, and after a few minutes of digging, I found out that they hadn't been paying their hosting bill, which I'm sure the good people at CanSpace can tell you is important. So if you haven't found the culprit yet, what can you rule out? Can you prove it's not the theme or not a plugin? Once you've found that it's in your theme code, can you hone in on what bit of code is causing the problem? So if you can't find the answer, you find everything that isn't the answer. You might deactivate plugins one at a time, reload the page, see if that fixes it. Perhaps something works on one page, but not another page. Can you kind of drill down and figure out what is so different about that page? So plugin conflicts they show up for a variety of possibilities, many of which are out of your control. It could be one plugin is trying to alter the same functionality that another plugin or your current theme is controlling. One might be loading a different version of the same script or a dependency that another plugin or your theme is using. Or the plugin or the theme could just be out of date with the latest WordPress, not up to standards, not using correct PHP. So if it's not immediately obvious what plugin is causing the issue, you turn off each one at a time and reload to see if the problem disappears. Sometimes this isn't possible because the functionality you need to test is an essential part of the current theme or a critical plugin. Like if you have an image gallery plugin, obviously, if it's not working, turning off the image gallery plugin isn't going to help you find what the problem really is. Sometimes a problem won't appear unless you have two particular plugins activated together, so you can keep an eye out for that. If you're getting a white screen of death and you can't even get to the dashboard to turn the plugins off and on, you can temporarily turn a plugin off by renaming the folder in the plugins folder using SFTP or the command line or your file manager through your cPanel dashboard. So if you're new to coding and you're trying to do some custom coding on your site yourself, you've probably already discovered some of the things that can go wrong. Everybody gets hung up on a mismatched parenthesis or an accidental missing semicolon once in a while. If you're not running on a live site, make sure that you've got PHP errors turned on so it'll tell you what line is breaking. Bad logic means your code is running just fine, but what you think you've asked it to do and what it's actually doing are different. So you might be feeding it the wrong variables, or you might have put a critical statement in the wrong part of the process. So leave yourself breadcrumbs along the way to hone in on where you're going off track. Display the values of all your variables so that you can see if they're actually what you expect them to be at each point in the process. Sometimes it's something like you're actually working in the wrong file without even realizing it, and you can't understand why the problem isn't going away because you're absolutely sure that your code is correct. When you catch yourself doing this, fix the problem and then go for a nice walk outside because you need it. Programming languages are written by humans, and so humans, well, I mean, they used to be. Now we've got AI doing some of it for us, but still, as humans, we need to be able to describe what's going on here. If you're not sure about your logic, look at it and read out exactly what it's doing line by line, and trace it with your mind. This won't help you if you've just got a semicolon in the wrong place, but it might help your brain map out what's happening and find if you have an error in your logic. So a couple of tools that will help you with this. Having a staging site, whether it's on your local computer or on your server, is really vital for being able to test things in a safe sandbox environment where you can break and fix things where no one can see. So if you need to do a lot of experimenting, maybe something isn't working on your live site, you can clone your live site to a staging server that no one can see, and you can try to figure things out there without your customers or visitors seeing a whole bunch of weirdness. If you're hosting with CanSpace, you can set up a staging site using Softaculous. I've added a link to the instructions to resources page. I'll be giving you the link for at the end. A browser inspector is a critically important tool without which you won't be able to get anything done. And it helps you hone in on culprits, especially for layout and JavaScript errors. So you can have a look at the JavaScript console, and if you're seeing something is just not working, and see if there is an error coming up, and that'll tell you what plugin is causing the error. Being able to do accurate Google searches is often more important than even knowing the ins and the outs of the language you're working in. Plugins and themes often have good support forums as well, where the author has answered someone else's question about the same issue. So a lot of the times it's just about clever searching. Sometimes ChatGPT can be useful. Sometimes it also can lead you down the garden path, I've found, but more often than not, it's been helpful to me. So I've done my best to condense a 25-year career into less than 15 minutes, but I may have missed something. So I have a link here for you where you can find a bit more about troubleshooting in general, ways of dealing with WordPress problems, and a little bit more about me and the sort of maintenance packages that I also offer if you'd like to have somebody else dive in and figure some of the things about your website out for you. So if you've got questions, let's see what we can tackle in the remaining time here.
Thank you very much for this great presentation, Kirsten. I think it will definitely calm a lot of people down, knowing how to approach an issue in a calm and structured way. I did link to your page in the chat as well. So if people would like to kind of copy paste it for reference, this is the time to do so. I'm just gonna, we're gonna go take some questions as you mentioned. So if someone has a question, please use the Q&A button. below. I'm just going to kick off with one question while we're collecting them. So there's so many, when people install WordPress, the first thing most of them do is go look for a theme. But there's so many free and premium WordPress themes out there. So when looking for one, what should our clients pay attention to in order to select one that is properly built? And how do you even tell if it's properly built?
Yeah, good. That is a very good question. So it's slightly different processes, I think, for free and commercial themes. Most of the free ones that are in the WordPress repository have generally been vetted pretty well. The commercial themes, for me, it's very important to see that the theme is being updated regularly. I've had clients pick out, like, they absolutely wanted this particular theme, and I'm like, nobody's touched that in a year. And sure enough, the theme was riddled with bugs, and I had to spend a lot of extra time kind of trying to resolve issues that we wouldn't have had with a theme that the authors hadn't abandoned. So I look for one that's been routinely updated, that gets good reviews, where the authors respond to support, and you can see that they're responding to support questions within a reasonable amount of time, that they're not just leaving people hanging with tech support questions for months. So yeah, there end up being a handful that I go to on ThemeForest that I've used before and found to be pretty stable. Everybody's kind of going to have their preferences for, which type of backend editor they're using and so on. So the top ones on ThemeForest tend to be pretty reliable. They do get updated regularly. And the WordPress repository, the free ones there too, I would also look at reviews, look at if people are complaining about something, look if the author is updating them and answers questions. Those would be the biggest tips.
If someone has made a child theme for our site, does the theme it is made of have to be regularly updated?
Oh, yes. Because suppose you have a child theme that maybe you've only modified one or two of the pages in your child theme, and the parent theme gets a vulnerability. Well, you're still running that parent theme, so you need to patch that vulnerability and do the update on the parent theme when it comes out. It might mean that you might have to change your child theme depending on what you've modified. It depends what you're overriding in your child theme, but yes, absolutely, you want to be updating the parent.
One more question from Jackie. What are your thoughts on plugins installed on WordPress sites? Should there be a limit? Does it affect the page load speed and create vulnerabilities?
Yes, it does. I often get sites handed to me where the previous developer has kind of just used plugins for everything, and they would have been better off having a custom theme built from scratch that didn't have 40 plugins, because you're almost guaranteed to run into issues with that many plugins. The limit is, it's going to depend on your site. There's one site I was looking at where they had 30 to 40 plugins, and I genuinely could not whittle them down because there were like 10 plugins related to WooCommerce and 10 plugins related to DashLearn, which is an e-learning system. And they were all essential, but they were just a lot of individual plugins. Yes, you're definitely, I mean, plugins are great, don't get me wrong. Like, if you need a plugin for something, use the plugin. That's how you get more functionality, because I'm assuming we're not all plugin developers in this group. So yeah, use plugins, but again, have they been updated regularly? Have there been reports of vulnerabilities that haven't been patched? Do they get good reviews? Do people, because people will complain on the WordPress.org forums. I also prefer to go through the WordPress plugin repository rather than buying commercial themes, because WordPress.org will let you know if the plugin hasn't been updated in 2 years, and it will take things down if it violates something, or if it's got a severe vulnerability that isn't being patched. So you can have a little bit more confidence about that, and that updates will be available. Whereas when you buy from kind of a random site, yeah, you don't always know. So yeah, just doing your research, looking at reviews, and the limit is going to kind of depend on what you need. Yeah.
Talking about the importance of WordPress plugins, question from Angela: is there a good and free plugin for e-commerce that is easy to set up?
Oh, Angela, I'm sorry. There is a good and free plugin for e-commerce. There's a bunch of them. The only thing is, they will ding you, like anybody who is trying to make money online. If they are helping you making money online, then they want a cut of it. So WooCommerce, it's free. You can absolutely install WooCommerce, and there's a whole lot of others too. That's just the first one that leaps to mind.
Shopify?
Hmm?
Shopify?
Yay! Shopify is a third party. So you would be building your thing in Shopify and then sort of embedding it into WordPress. I like Shopify. I like it because they are a little bit more obligated to give you support, whereas WooCommerce, you're very much just kind of left on your own. The thing is, though, that inevitably I find there will be something that my client wants to do in WooCommerce that we will have to buy a paid plugin for. And oh, this one's $50 a year. Oh, that one's $150 a year. Oh, you can use this payment processor, but that's going to take 3% out of this. So there end up being all these additional costs. Easy to set up also. Sometimes not. Like if you're just selling a digital download, I find that's pretty straightforward. If you now have to calculate shipping and taxes, well, then you need the extra. Some of those things are built in, some of them aren't. There start being all these layers of complication, some of which is absolutely essential if you're going to run like a really high quality e-commerce site. But it's not always super straightforward. It's actually, e-commerce is one of my least favorite things to do because there's always something. I'm trying to remember what the other e-commerce plugin I've used that I liked was, but it was kind of the same thing. There end up being extra costs, which may or may not matter to you depending on what you're trying to sell and what your setup is. So the answer, I guess, is sort of.
Another question from Jackie. Could you explain a little bit about cookie consent on websites? When is it actually needed? What can we really track with cookies?
Well, okay, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know a lot of the specifics of the different regions. A lot of it has to do with who you're targeting in the world. Like California has different rules. The European Union has different rules. Basically, it's mainly meant to let people know that you may be trying to track them and gather some sort of personal information. It's mostly important if you've actually got users who are creating accounts on there, where you're going to have some semblance of their data. But a lot of plugins are going to add cookies that you don't even necessarily know about. So I tend to like having a cookie warning on a site that, like even if the client isn't consciously. Like if they are definitely trying to track users, then absolutely you have to have that. I don't tend to worry about it as much on kind of like small personal sites. Yeah, I'd say I'm not the expert on that one. It's good to have it out of caution. To me, it's sort of become kind of meaningless though, because it's, you know, it's on everybody's site and everybody just sort of clicks accept without really knowing what they're agreeing to. Right?
Everywhere.
It seemed
Agree
like
to
a good
all.
idea at the time. And, yeah.
Can you, just to continue to talk about the plugins, can you recommend any tools or plugins for monitoring the performance of a WordPress site? Ones that may alert you if something is not working right.
Oh yeah. I like using Manage WP. They will set you up so that you can run a daily security check and a daily backup, and it'll be an offsite backup too, which is kind of nice. Because at least that way, you know, I mean, I'm sure nothing would ever happen at CanSpace with your data. That would be bad. But just for your peace of mind, and if you're doing it for a client, for your client's peace of mind, that you also have a copy of the site somewhere else. But they will monitor your site for downtime, and they'll let you know when plugins need to be updated. They'll let you know if you're running a plugin that has a vulnerability that you need to patch or remove the plugin. So, and there's other things it can do. It can generate reports for your clients. Yeah, so I like that one quite a bit.
You mentioned on it in your presentation, but we did not expand on that. Can you explain what is staging and how beneficial is it to learn to use? And is it difficult to learn?
It kind of depends on your setup. I've had some hosts where there's just basically one click that is like, create a staging copy. I haven't used Softaculous, so I don't know how easy or difficult that one is to work with, but it's nice that it's there. What it basically is a version of your website that nobody else but you sees, and it gives you kind of a sandbox to play in where you can safely make changes without anybody seeing it on your live site. So it's good for, say, you want to add a new feature to your site, you can test it out on the staging site first and then push it to your live or production site. So that way, you know, you've troubleshot things before you are deploying them to the world. You can make design changes. So if you want to redesign a site and you already have a site that's running, you're going to be building that somewhere else and then deploying it to your live location. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can also run a site on your local computer rather than on the server. There's a bunch of different programs that will let you do that. Some of them are easier to use than others, but it's worth diving into if you're going to get into this in any depth. And even just having a staging site to test things out on is just helpful.
I have one more question is regarding widgets. Can you explain the role of widgets in WordPress and how a beginner can effectively use them?
Widgets are generally kind of little blocks of code that can be placed at different points of your site, and whether there is a place to put the widgets is going to depend on your theme. So sometimes your theme will have places to put widgets in the footer, and so you could do something like have your one section with your contact info, one widget that generates a little menu of your small version of the menu of your site. It's all going to depend on the theme that you're using, really. There's a lot of different widgets, a lot of different things that you can put there, but it's just kind of a handy way of putting content in a predetermined part of your template.
What we're going to do is we're now going to turn on to our security guru, Pavel Sushko to learn how to make a WordPress website as secure as it can be. Pavel?
Yeah, okay. Let me share my screen there. Oh, I can't share it. Okay, there we go.
There you go, all yours.
Right. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, okay, good. So yeah, hello everyone. I'm Pavel Sushko, and I'm very excited to be talking to you today about WordPress security. So before we dive into this topic of WordPress security, I just want to say a word about myself. One of the important things about me is that cybersecurity is much more than just a career for me. It's I truly have a love for the field, and that's allowed me to achieve multiple accolades, some of which you can see on your screen, the notable ones. You know, I'm a recognized security contributor for Honeywell. I'm published in the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. It has also led me later to co-founding SB Software Inc., where I'm now the Chief Executive Officer. And by the way, on the left there, you can see my LinkedIn information if you want to scan it. If you have any questions after the webinar, I'd be more than happy to answer and guide you along with in your needs. So speaking of SB Software Inc., we're a young, dynamic, and professional company founded in Montreal in 2022, and we've accrued clients worldwide. Here at SB Software Inc., we strongly believe in making cybersecurity more accessible to a wider range of customers. And as a checkpoint partner, we not only have the skills, but also the resources to back that mission. But enough about us, and let's actually dive into some of the main issues we see with clients in our day-to-day interactions with them regarding their WordPress sites. We like to start with just the fact that there's a certain popularity peril with WordPress. You know, there's a reason this webinar today is specifically about WordPress. And that reason is that it simply represents nearly half of all the sites on the internet. And that number is not going down anytime soon, considering the amount of WordPress sites that are added daily. So all in all, this creates a very attractive target for attackers. You know, we can see examples here of multiple millions of sites being vulnerable due to a single vulnerability. The most shocking number on here is that 12 million, especially in the context of the fact that in 2021 in Canada, we had a little bit less than 12 million sites total, right? And this is one vulnerability attaching itself to 12 million sites. So here we have a graph from the National Institute of Standards and Technologies on the left that indicates the amount of vulnerabilities we see every year attached to WordPress. And we can see there's a general trend of growth. So attackers are more commonly attacking it, and researchers are more commonly trying to defend it. And what's even more interesting as a graph is the one on the right, which indicates the percentage of vulnerabilities that are WordPress vulnerabilities relative to other issues we see in security. So that also is growing, which indicates that not only are there more vulnerabilities, but WordPress is being attacked more proportionally as well. So clearly, WordPress is a big target. Now, the unfortunate part with this is that there is no direct remediation, right? As we said, WordPress presence isn't diminishing anytime soon. So because of that, attackers will keep on trying to breach it. However, there are things you can do to lower your risk of being affected by these things. You're going to hear me talking a lot about security best practices throughout this presentation. And what you're going to realize is that there's a lot of them. You can see a few of them on your screen here. But the reality with these best practices is that they also vary in difficulty of implementation quite a little bit. And you might need to even reach out to professionals for help with some slightly more difficult implementations. Now, another flaw we see, and truthfully, not only in WordPress, but in IT as a whole, is a weak implementation of authentication and authorization best practices, right? Despite 80% of breaches occurring from privileged accounts, meaning administrative accounts, only about 25% of small to medium businesses require multi-factor authentication. And then in a search of nearly 2 million passwords, the password admin appeared over 40,000 times. Right? These are very weak passwords, often default passwords that are very short and very easy to breach. So what can we do to bolster our access control, right? Once again, we're talking about security best practices. In the case of access control, we're talking about strong, unique passwords, right? Consider using a password manager because more likely than not, if you remember your password, it's not very secure. Next, we also have the idea of you want to make sure that you're implementing the principle of least privilege. If you don't need access to something, you shouldn't have access to it. And that extends to your employees and your consultants. If, for example, a consultant comes in to write a blog post for you, they shouldn't have administrative access to your WordPress account. After that, multi-factor authentication. The fact that only 25% of businesses use it, small businesses use it, is shocking, because it's a very easy implementation to put in place, and it's very effective at stopping credential harvesting attacks, right? And then the most important part of everything is probably to keep yourself educated, especially on phishing awareness. Kirsten mentioned ChatGPT a bit earlier. AI has become readily available. Everyone can write a very enticing and a very convincing phishing email. So make sure you keep on top of those. Now, another issue we can see in WordPress quite often is WordPress appears very accessible and very approachable. That's why you're seeing so many sites using WordPress. But in reality, if you want to do it right, if you want to set it up properly and securely, it's a fairly complex process. And in IT generally, what we see is that there's a constant balancing act between usability and security. And this comes kind of from the history of technology being there to help us in our productivity. But unless you're part of a security team, more likely than not, usability is going to win over security for you most times. Because of that, we see many, many misconfigurations in WordPress sites, some of which we're listing here on our slide. So once again, how can we avoid this? How can we avoid falling into this issue of misconfigurations? Well, a good first step would be to choose reputable hosting, because unless you have a very good understanding of technology, hosting your own servers securely is a very difficult thing to do. So when you delegate that part to a trusted third-party provider that does this for a living, then you're saving yourself those headaches. After that, your next step, when you were talking about your WordPress site, is make sure that when you're setting up your site, your initial setup is secure. You want to build on security best practices. You don't want to implement them later. So in this case, when we're talking about specifically for deploying your site, we're talking about things like make sure your file permissions are good. Make sure you disable things like directory browsing. Limit the number of login attempts that you can do. Put a firewall in front of it, and the list goes on and on. Now, we also have the idea in security, kind of branching out a bit, kind of taking inspiration from the privilege of the principle of least privilege, is the idea that if you don't use something, remove it, right? If you had a plugin or a theme on your WordPress site that you used 3 years ago that you no longer use today, remove it from your site. Because if a vulnerability comes out for that website, you are now vulnerable for it, even though you don't use it. So, make sure that you keep track of the things that you actually use and remove those that you don't. Now, the next issue we very commonly see is that people just aren't good at keeping their things up to date. And it's understandable with the amount of updates you need to keep track of. As a baseline for your WordPress site, we're talking about your WordPress site itself, your plugins, your themes. And as Kirsten mentioned, some of those things break sometimes. You update one thing and suddenly you don't have a site. And now, if you're also self-hosting on top of that, you're looking at keeping your PHP versions up to date, your OS up to date, your server software, your Apache, Nginx, IIS. You need to keep all of that up to date as well. And one would think that you can sign up to a few update advisories from these providers, and that you'll be able to kind of stay on top of this whole situation. But if you've ever read a security advisory, you can know that some of them are extremely long and painful. I mean, if you want to take the worst culprit of them all is Microsoft. Read a Patch Tuesday remediation guide, and you're going to see that not only are you going to have to apply 130 new updates, some of those updates aren't even going to fix the issue entirely, and you're going to need to go into your registries, into your group policies, and it's just a lot of process. And because of that, we end up with a fact that 49% of external-facing WordPress sites are end of life, meaning that if there's a security issue that comes out that people are made aware of on those older versions, WordPress isn't going to release a security update for that. So it's up to the user to make sure that they can either circumvent it themselves. And for this, you kind of have, to master this, you kind of have two paths. And the idea there is that, as you can see on your managed hosting side, you have a few less things to deal with. So if you select a trusted third-party provider like CanSpace to host your WordPress site, you're avoiding some of those headaches. And the truth too in this graph is that this isn't a very fair comparison, because those last 3 points on the self-hosting part are heavy. There's costs associated to them. There's onboarding associated with them. It's a lot of effort. So we know that we're seeing these issues in WordPress, right? And not just WordPress, and security as a whole. But sometimes it's hard for us to draw a link between a vulnerability, a risk, and its actual consequences. So when we're talking about consequences in security, what could they be? In cybersecurity, basically with everything, you can go from reputational damage to whole legal ramifications, especially with the advent of things here in Quebec, for example, like the updates to Law 25 and things like that. Now, you also have to think about the fact that, let's say you lose everything because of one of these vulnerabilities. When can you be back up to normal? And not only that, will you ever be back up to normal, right? If it was an e-commerce platform and people were putting in their credit cards into your platform and they know you've been breached, are they going to trust you to process those payments, right? And then from there too, can the attacker pivot? Let's say you're hosting the server in your office somewhere, right? And someone breaks into that server. Can they now get access to more sensitive content on your network? Or maybe it could be something as simple as you're reusing your credentials that you're using in a financial institution. And now suddenly they have access to your financial information because your WordPress site got breached, right? So there's a lot of consequences that come with not dealing with these issues. And truthfully, when an issue like this comes up, you don't want to be on the receiving end of it. You don't want to end up having to remediate. Remediation is expensive. In the United States, we see that the average, according to IBM, the average cost of a breach is $4.5 million US. And it's long, and because of that, it's extremely inaccessible for smaller to medium-sized businesses. And truthfully, not only them, we can see big players like Uber and MGM getting breached, high multi-billion-dollar companies that go on to posting tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of salaried positions that they can't even fulfill because there's just a lack of security personnel that is available. So if MGM's having a hard time managing remediation, the smaller guys, we all have a problem too, right? So how do we fit into this ecosystem? How can we help? Well, we have a few of the kinds of offerings that we see help our clients in their day-to-day operations of their sites and their WordPress sites. And an important part about us too is that we understand cybersecurity in the Canadian environment. We're not a massive security company from the US that simply expanded into Canada. We're built and founded in Montreal with experience across multiple sectors that are very specific to Canada. Because of that, we can tailor our offering specifically to your needs. And as we said, we're Checkpoint partners. They're one of the multi-billion-dollar security companies. What does that mean? Well, that means that we have access to not only their resources, but also their experts in helping us make the security more accessible to Canadian clients here. All in all, in security, you want to make sure that to avoid these remediations issues and everything, you want to stay proactive. And that's kind of why the general offering in security, it tends to be a more proactive one. I have a couple of reference slides just for my due diligence of sources, and we can move on to the Q&A. But I just want to add that we have penetration testing as one of the things that we offer. And if you've never seen a penetration testing report and what kind of insight it can give you into your vulnerabilities, you can open up the QR code on your phone. You're going to see our CanSpace page with the offer, and you're also going to be able to see what a penetration testing report could look like. Of course, it's an example. It's not a real report. We wouldn't be able to publish that. So now we can move on to questions.
Wow. Once you start thinking about it on a grand scale of things, how massively popular WordPress actually is, it really puts security into perspective of how critical it is. Essentially, an identified security problem for one WordPress install somewhere means exposure for millions of websites. Thank you, Pavel. That was eye-opening, and some of the beautiful graphs that I have not come across before shows the significance of the problem. So let's get some questions going. Okay, we have one security question. We will actually pick up from the person that tried to ask the question before.
Right.
I'll read the question, and if you're comfortable answering it, or if Kirsten would like to jump in as well. Basically, the question was for multi-site, right? For multi-site, I've heard that databases are shared, thus making all sites vulnerable and also giving access to pages that should not be accessed by that user. So if that sort of frames the question that you can understand and answer or comment on.
So basically the idea here being, is multi-site secure? Can you use it? Should you use it? And should you maybe avoid it? Right. So from my understanding of
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna invite Miguel, the person who's asking the question, Perfect. To talk. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Miguel, your microphone is on. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Yes,
yeah, so you actually summarized the question fairly well. You know, typing all of that would have taken a while. But yes, I've heard of not just multi-site, but also multi-tenant. And so I'm curious to see if there's any issues in terms of security with multi-tenant and or multi-site.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the truth of the matter in that field is there are security there are things you have to keep in mind in security when you're talking about multi-site. So my understanding of multi-sites is you're using one core WordPress configuration to host multiple sites on it. Now, this does mean that, yes, in fact, if you are using if you have a slightly less security built on one side and more of it on the other side, you could be bypassing the security of the more secure website through the less secure site, because you would still be able to potentially tunnel yourself down to the core of the WordPress installation. So there are security questions to look at in that. And then multi-tenant, the idea of multi-tenant or shared servers or things like that is, well, we've seen it in our experience where a certain site has some custom code that gets them. Yes, sorry.
Pavel, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if it's for everyone, but your microphone started to make a funny sound. Is
it better now?
Seems way better.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, let me pick up from where I was roughly. So as I said, yes, you are potentially introducing attack surface to the core of your WordPress installation, because you now have more things to manage, and they could be used to eventually, pivot yourself into either the core of the WordPress installation or the other sites. So there are security questions to look at there. And then for multi-tenant, we've seen it quite often where people have shared servers with slightly less reputable providers because they're trying to save a buck here and there. And one of the sites has some custom code on it that is breachable, and they get breached through it. And then later the attackers use their first door in to pivot into the other websites and compromise the other sites while they're there. They potentially get a full server compromise going, escalate their privileges. So there are security things to be aware of there. But if you're using a multi-site for yourself, you just want to make sure that you're applying those security best practices and those security and those defenses on all of your attack surface. So that's for multi-sites.
Miguel, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for the question. We have another question from Paula. WordPress being vulnerable security-wise, for a small business or non-profit, security can get difficult and pricey, as you mentioned. Is there a different website builder you can recommend that is not as vulnerable as WordPress?
So when we get into recommending a specific technology, it becomes very complicated because everything is vulnerable to some extent. There's always a possibility for there's a risk of being breached with anything you want. Even your big Shopify cloud integrations and or Salesforce or things like that. You're still creating attack vectors in there. I can't recommend a WordPress builder over another WordPress builder. What I can say though is that these vulnerabilities you can mitigate them before they get to the plugin that's affected or the theme or WordPress itself, right? If you're putting a web application firewall in front of your site, you're already a part way there. And what we've seen is these providers such as Cloudflare or Checkpoint or Akamai or Cyber Defense here in Quebec. What they're able to do is before we ever get a remediation, an actual remediation in the code available, they're able to go and already establish an attack signature and an indicator of attack before it even gets to your site, and they're able to stop it there. So I wouldn't say that you should avoid using WordPress specifically. What I would say though is make sure you're hitting on those security best practices, right? Don't add too many plugins. The 40 plugins, they may load your website slower, but they're also introducing a lot of vulnerabilities potentially, especially when you're looking at the plugins that are less vetted, that are less known, that, free plugins, they sound great, but what does that mean? That means there's no dev team behind it being paid to keep it up to date and make sure it's secure. So it's really all about your security best practices. And at that point, you should be secure on basically, you should be as secure as you can get on basically every platform.
Could you expand a little on the points in the slide that talked about file permissions and removing unused plugins, please?
So for file permissions, depending on which you approach it from, if you have complete server access, right, and you're really getting down and dirty with, if you're hosting this on Linux or something with these specific, chmod permissions on there, who owns the files, who has ownership over that, what runs your server, what credentials run your server instance itself, and you want to make sure that you don't give too much. So often we've seen it often enough where developers kind of go in and establish a server with root access, and they use root being the highest level of privilege on a Linux system, and they use this root user not only to run their their server instance, but also to interact with their databases and all of that. And at that point, what you're looking at is if your site gets breached and you get access to the server as that site user, and that user is root, that the highest level of permissions, you just gave complete access to your file instead of having a need for a second vulnerability on top of that within your server to allow full server compromise.
A follow-up question from Miguel. Cadence seems to be better than Elementor. Is that a fair statement from a security perspective?
I think from a very high level overview, my slide did Elementor a bit dirty with showing it in most of those vulnerabilities. But the reality of it is the reason why Elementor can reach 12 million sites in one single vulnerability is because it's used by 12 million sites. Elementor, I think, is the most used WordPress builder available. So because of that, they have more target. And it's kind of like coming back to the question of a WordPress or another site builder. Just because WordPress or Elementor are more popular and attacked more often doesn't necessarily mean that they are a more faulty product. At that point, it's about, you want to look into these site builders, these plugins. You want to see what they're doing with their security. You want to make sure that they're transparent with their breaches. They're transparent with what they actually do. One of the current trends we see in security is services publishing their penetration testing reports publicly. And what that does is that allows security assessors outside of the company and outside of the consulting company to come see it, see if they're actually doing something on security. You know, you're also looking at compliances. You know, compliances make it easier for you to establish whether a product is doing everything it should do for security. And so once again, I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. I would say, you know, look into it and make sure that you're doing your due diligence with checking its security.
For an e-commerce site, would you recommend using third-party payment systems like PayPal or Stripe to accept payments versus using plugins like WooCommerce that store customer data on the website database?
So in general, the idea there is that you don't necessarily want to be managing the sensitive user information yourself. What you're doing when you're integrating with something like PayPal or something like Stripe, and all of that is stored in the cloud instead of, but even there, WooCommerce might be doing that too. I'm not exactly, you know, an expert on WooCommerce specifically. But if we're talking about specifically storing those sensitive informations on the in the site, in the server, then I would say when you're delegating that responsibility to a big provider like PayPal or Stripe that have hundreds of millions of dollars to put into security and that have all of these compliances that they hit on, that do that are able to really go in there and make sure they test everything as much as they can, you tend to get a less risky implementation. Yes. So
a question from me. What are some signs that a WordPress site has been compromised, and what should be the steps to take in such an event, besides contacting you, obviously?
So yes, with indicators of compromise, they vary a lot, right? It could be anything from visual changes, like genuine visual changes where people are trying to utilize your reputable domain name, your reputable site to you know, entice people into going to more malicious directions. It could also be you know, less visible things like suddenly you have some unknown files appearing, you have some unknown users appearing. If you have once again, if you have server access and you see that there's some weird scripts that you're not aware of, you never put on there, maybe you should look into it, right? Same thing with code. Has there been any code added into the plugins that you're using that could be allowing an attacker to connect back through a backdoor, right? And even simple things like logs. Make sure you check your audit logs, right? Do you remember signing in yesterday at 2 in the morning? Maybe you didn't do that, but why is that showing up, right? So at that point, you have a lot of varying IOCs, indicators of compromise that you just need to keep track of. And as I said, you don't want to be in a space where you need to contact someone because you've been breached. It's a very complicated process.
Are there any security plugins or tools that you can recommend that are particularly useful for that purpose for WordPress?
So plugins specifically, I'm a bit more conservative, and I can't say that I can recommend specific security plugins simply because Elementor, for example, right? 12 million sites, they have funding, they have the resources, they can still get breached. And when you're introducing these plugins, a lot of the time, you know, especially when you're talking about free plugins or less popular plugins, what they could be is simply a utility that someone developed because they needed it on their site and then shipped it out for everyone else. And now you're looking at this plugin that isn't very actively being tested and updated, and the only time it's being tested is by an actual malicious actor. You know, we believe more in the tried and true security solutions. We're talking about firewalls, web application firewalls. We're talking about proxying, you know, geo blocking, things like that. You know, things that you have that have been in the industry for a long time and that are trusted for massive sites, even WordPress sites, right? So that's where we're at more specifically.
last quick question, which may be just the most silliest question you've ever been asked from me. This common space, does common space represent a security threat? So can someone insert any harmful content through comments in WordPress, and should we keep them open or closed?
So actually, that's extremely far from a silly question. You know, according to the OWASP, we're seeing that. So what this could represent, common space is anything that a user can interact with. Anything on the computer system could be vulnerable. And with comments, a very common vulnerability you can see is what we call cross-site scripting. Actually, it's so common, it makes the OWASP top 10 basically every year. The OWASP top 10 representing the 10 most common vulnerabilities for websites. And yeah, of course, you could absolutely input malicious code into it. WordPress is running, for example, on PHP. If that comment is not sanitized and it's just directly reflected back at the user or directly put into a database, you can potentially break out of the functionality that comment is supposed to serve and go further, either into the database, either redisplay malicious code to the user that allows you to hijack their session or many other different things like that.
Pavel, thank you very much. We're now back with our SEO rockstar, Corey Murata, returning to tell us more secrets on how to increase your WordPress-based website's visibility on search engines and drive more traffic. Corey?
Perfect. Thank you. First off, thank you for having me back. Thank you, Kirsten and Pavel, for setting the bar so high. Next time, I should go first. Anyways, I'd like to get I'd like to know a little bit more about the audience who I'm kind of interacting with. I'm hoping you guys can help me out. So in the chat, if you guys wouldn't mind, just kind of explaining like your niche and maybe like your role at your company, if you're a business owner, if you're a marketing professional. So for me, for example, it'd be marketing, agency, digital services. Hoping just to kind of gauge, who here is in the chat. So web hosting, that's a good one. See what else we got. Hope we get some others rolling in. Plugin software company startup. Okay, nice. That's very interesting. COO. Okay. Small business owner, retail, brick and mortar. Nice. I love those. Appreciate my local business owners. Okay. Small biz, nonprofit, interesting. Love that. Engineering, of course, consulting, plenty of those. Okay. It's really cool. I was always kind of curious, especially with the last time I was on. Small business, awesome. Okay. So we'll get started here. So we're looking at WordPress SEO tips and best practices today. So if you're on a WordPress website, what can you do? How do you use it to kind of improve your SEO? Just want to make sure I am sharing my screen, Martashis. We're good? Yeah. Okay. So who am I? So Corey Murata. I'm an SEO specialist at SEO Plus. We're a leading Canadian digital marketing agency. So I've been in SEO for over 3 years in all kind of aspects, local, B2B, e-commerce. I've got a portfolio of clients from multiple niches, so it is very interesting to see who we're speaking with now. And our agency is a team of over 50 employees. We're a Google Premier partner, Meta partner, Shopify, and winner of the best SEO campaign at the Canadian Search Awards. So we'll do a bit of a recap on SEO. I kind of touched on this the last webinar that we did. But since we're focusing on specifically WordPress, that's where the majority of this is going to be. So SEO, search engine optimization, is the process of improving the quality and quantity of website traffic, of your website traffic. So just getting more traffic to your pages and your website from search engines like Google, Bing, Yahoo, even YouTube. Plenty of search engines out there. So I touched on this last time, but there are 3 main pillars of SEO. We got on page, which is basically all of your your content that the audience can actually see. Then you've got the off page, which is more of your backlinks in your social media profile. And then you've got technical SEO, which is more of the back end coding and how search engines are interacting and crawling your website. With WordPress specifically, we're focusing on pillar 1 and 3, on page and technical, not so much to do with off page. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. So we're going to start with themes and page builders. Kind of already touched on this quite a bit. Some questions have been asked, but I thought I would provide a bit of insight as well. So Cadence has been talked about, Elementor has been talked about. I'm not sure if we talked about Divi, but these are some of my favorites that I've used personally. Specifically Cadence, I really enjoyed on my website. It was very easy to use. Customer support's great, I found, and those are some things you really want to look for, is the simplicity. So when you're actually utilizing it, and the customer support is something you want to have access to, and you want to make sure that they're actually helpful and very prompt. And then also website speed is something when you're looking at deciding and how it affects the user experience, because obviously these builders are big chunks of code, and it can really affect how the performance of your website. And there are a lot of complaints out there about certain builders causing slow performance. So what I would recommend is watching like YouTube videos, joining Facebook groups, interacting with other forums, and asking questions about what other people's experiences have been in your specific niche. So if you're a software company and you need specific pages, maybe interact with other software groups and ask questions about what other themes people are using and how they're liking it. I know that's what I did for my websites. So we'll jump into plugins now. This is one of the biggest themes of the day. So what are plugins exactly? Basically, they're apps for your website. They're packages of code that you install on your website. And essentially, the way I kind of see it is, your website is just a bunch of code. And for SEO specifically, there are certain things you need to do, like updating the code to improve your SEO. And the plugins simplify that whole process. They simplify the web development tasks. And the main purpose is just to improve the functionality and the features of your website. So a plugin can help kind of change things on the front end with the way that people interact with it, the visual for the users, but also just they can help you make kind of code adjustments on the back end, can really simplify those tasks and speed up the time. So just a bit more about what plugins can do. Optimizing metadata. This is a huge one for SEO. Your title tag, which is basically the Google title, huge ranking factor. Can really, when you optimize that for your keywords, it can really boost up your rankings. Do you want to do that through the back end, through code? Be my guest. Or you can just install a plugin that you can just do it in bulk, even if you wanted to. It's very simple, or just page by page. URL redirect. So if you're changing a URL on your website, you should redirect it to another page that's more suitable. A plugin can help with that. Creating schema markup. This is more technical jargon, but it's just kind of structured data, more code, and there's certain languages for schema that you need to use. And a plugin can just really simplify that solution. Improving your website speed. If you asked me to improve website speed through HTML and JavaScript, I would take a year to figure it out and probably still wouldn't. Or I can click a button on my plugin and it can do most of the work for me. Adding table of contents, one-off projects. If you have a specific use case, you're like, oh, this is going to take forever. Is there a way I can do this with a plugin? Someone else has probably thought of it, and you can search it up online. I know a lot of the theme of the day was, a lot of plugins can be vulnerable. So of course, make sure you're being wary of that. But they are definitely very, very useful. And if it is just a one-time project, then you can likely remove it after, as long as it saves the data. In the end, they save you time and money. You can either hire a web developer or try and do it yourself, or a lot of times the plugin can really just save both of those. So here's my plugin stack that we typically have on most of our client websites. The number one is Yoast SEO. There are basically two websites in this world. There's websites that use Yoast SEO, and then there's websites that don't rank on page 1 of Google. I'm a huge fan of it. Either have Yoast SEO or an equivalent SEO plugin like Rank Math or all-in-one SEO. You need something like this to really make your life a lot easier to improve your SEO performance in your rankings. Development team. This is something that it's like the go-to recommendation for when we need to improve our website speed and performance. Can really simplify and speed up your website. ACF Pro, that's Advanced Custom Field Pro. So if you want to make like custom content blocks that you basically want to replicate on multiple pages, ACF Pro is just like, it's a kind of like a one-time creation, and then can be applied to multiple pages multiple times. It can be reused. So very, very convenient. Gravity Forms to collect your contact forms. Table of Contents Plus. So let's say you have 50 blog posts on your website. If you want to add tables of content, a table of contents to all of them, you can go ahead and you can try to do it manually, or you can just install the plugin and then it'll pull all the headings and create it for you on all your pages at once, saving you a lot of time. And then 301 redirect, that's like redirecting a URL. Redirection is another one that's good, but this is basically my kind of stack that I like to always have, and these are things I use on a daily basis when I'm performing and doing my optimizations. So we'll get into sitemaps now. So I'll touch on what is a sitemap. So basically, it's a blueprint of your website. It's just an area that contains all of your URLs of your website. And the reason why we want to have one is because it helps Google find your pages. So if you create a page and you want to rank it on Google, well, they need to be able to find it before they index it, before they rank it in the algorithm. And if it's not linked from anywhere, then they're not really going to find it, or it'll take forever for them to find it. But having a sitemap that contains your complete list of URLs is something that they can find, and they'll be able to index it and rank it on search engines. And how to create one. So I mentioned Yoast SEO. You can do that very easily, just installing it. You can even do a quick Google search and it'll give you a step-by-step. Or you can use an equivalent plugin, or you can even go to XML sitemaps. You just Google that and even they'll create one for you. They'll crawl your website. You just want to make sure you're indexing the appropriate pages. So I'm sure most of you know what like a thank you page is. When someone fills out a contact form and it brings you to a thank you page, that's something that you probably wouldn't want to index. So you might consider removing it from your sitemap, and that's very easy to do as well. And then adding it to your robots.txt file. So your robots.txt file is basically a directive for search engines. It tells search engines which pages and paths they should crawl and not crawl. So adding your sitemap to that is just a best practice for SEO. So something you should definitely be doing. So we'll get into post types now. Specifically custom post types. This is a WordPress specific thing that I don't know if you can really find this on other CMSs, but something I really like about it. So they're basically just post types that have been added using code or plugins. So for example, it could be a blog is a custom post type, or a services page, a teams page, recipes, industries, locations. Let's say you're a multi-location website. You serve multiple areas throughout Canada. You may want to consider creating a custom post type for all your location pages, because these types of posts, these types of pages might have specific elements that you will want specifically on those pages as opposed to other pages. Same with your teams page. You might want to have a custom post type so everyone has like a place to put their image, their bio, their role, their contact info, and it can just be replicated. It just adds functionality to your website and can make your life a lot easier. We are big advocates for custom post types. Just a little bit of a best practice when you're kind of considering if you want to create one for specific page types. Just do some research. Maybe check out competitors, see what kind of content they're scaling. If you need, if you're a recipe blog, you probably want to have a recipe custom post type. That's just one example. Maybe you have equipment pages that you need to scale. That might be a good use case for you. And yeah, basically it's just to use to scale your content. So I know this was pretty short, but I definitely didn't want to overwhelm you guys with a lot of information. But the key takeaways of this: map out your post types. So really just kind of plan ahead of time. I can't stress that enough. I wouldn't just jump into stuff, because then you can create issues and you have to backtrack and it can get a bit messy. Really just kind of plan out what kind of content you want to create, and then consider if you need to make custom post types. Use your competitors to give you an idea. Install an SEO plugin 100%. Okay, you can see an example here. This is what Yoast looks like. So if you know what your keywords are, what you're targeting, you can put right here in the title, the SEO title tag with your plugin on the page, and you can optimize your title, your meta description, and the URL, the slug, and that can just save you a ton of time. So optimize your metadata, and then install a theme if you don't already have one. We kind of touched on that already. Most of you likely would have a theme, but definitely join those Facebook groups and check out YouTube videos on kind of the reviews on them. Those are probably the easiest ways to see what's going to work specifically for you. Now, last time I was on, I felt a bit bad. I didn't really have something for all of you to take away to help every single one of you. And our mission at SEO Plus is to make life better. And that's what we're here to do today. Is I'm here to serve you, and you guys were kind enough to give me your time. So I want to make sure I give you guys something that you can take away today that can help each and every one of you. And this is the SEO fundamentals checklist. So there's many areas in SEO that you can look at, and there's many things that you can do, and it can be a bit confusing. And when we onboard a client, these are the exact areas that we look at when we're planning out our SEO campaign. So you can download this checklist. These are all the areas that you need to worry about regarding SEO. It's absolutely free. Just click the link and you can download it. You can print it, tape it on your wall, put it on your fridge, whatever you want. Regift it. The holidays are coming up. But yeah, that's about it for me. I know this is pretty short and sweet. But I appreciate you guys having me on, and I hope you guys got some value from this. And we can throw it over to questions now.
Put it under the pillow, sleep with it. Memorize it. Corey, thank you so much for the presentation. As we receive questions for you, I have a question. You mentioned that Yoast SEO was your favorite SEO plugin. Does installing multiple SEO plugins damage your SEO?
Yeah, so it can actually yeah. So we've had scenarios where we have like Yoast SEO installed, and then someone installed like all-in-one SEO, and then the metadata didn't transfer over, so then we lost it all, and then like you can experience ranking drops. So basically, if like the data like doesn't transfer over, you get that will indirectly negatively impact your SEO. So just make sure that when you do, if you do install something, that it won't kind of like counteract whatever the previous one did. It won't erase all the data. That's a good question.
My favorite question about themes. How do WordPress themes impact SEO, if at all? And what should beginners look out for when selecting a theme?
Yeah, so kind of touched on it a little bit. Speed and performance is huge. The Facebook groups that I'm in, when I was looking up what themes to install, the major questions and major kind of takeaways and answers were just make sure your website speed and your mobile performance is optimal. So you can go to PageSpeed Insights and check out what your current website speed is. I believe I touched on this last time. But there's certain builders that just overall have better out-of-the-box performance than others. So that's a big one that you'll want to look out for. And then just making sure it has the capabilities to create the kind of content that your website requires. And that might be just doing competitor research and asking other people in your industry.
A question from Jackie. Do you have any recommendation on finding keywords to use for headings and metadata content? And a secondary question, is it better to use keywords that are less popular?
That is a great question. So finding keywords to use for headings and metadata content. So if you already have like a target keyword, or maybe that's the point of the question is to find the target keyword. So there's many ways you can do it. There's tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs to do keyword research. You can look at your Google Search Console data. So that's something that you should install immediately is your Google Search Console and connect that to your website, because then you can see real data for the keywords that you have. You can see impressions and clicks that you're getting. So I'd recommend getting a tool like SEMrush or Ahrefs, putting in your main competitors' URLs, and then seeing what keywords that they're ranking for. And then once you find the keyword, Google it yourself. Go to like the top 5 competitors that are ranking for that specific keyword, and then see what their headings are and what they're talking about. So I don't know if they're talking about, let's say the keyword is SEO content. It's probably a blog about that, how to write content for SEO, and then you'll look at the different headings, so the H2 headings of that blog, and you'll see common themes amongst like the top 5 competitors, and then you'd essentially want to make sure that the keywords that they have in their headings that they're using are very similar to what you're doing.
Once you've installed the backend plugin stack, is there an affordable and accurate service that does a similar job to SEMrush or Ahrefs to determine which keywords are generating the most traffic for competitors?
Yeah, so Ubersuggest is actually one by Neil Patel. That's like a more light version, I suppose. There's a lot of keyword tools out there. Even if you search up like best keyword tools, you'll get a few articles that gives you like a top 10 list probably. Keywords Everywhere is a good one. I think it's a bit cheaper. SEMrush and Ahrefs are the most expensive. But to see your competitor keywords, you will have to purchase something or jump on a free trial from one of the keyword tools. And if you want, you could do like a one-time purchase for SEMrush or Ahrefs, and then you have it for the month, and then you can essentially do all your research in month 1, and then you can download all the reports to a CSV, and you'll always have that data. So you'll have a specific number of reports based on your account for each month, but it's quite a bit. And if you're just looking at like a few competitors, it's unlikely you'll exceed that. So you can do 2 types of research: competitors, so grabbing all of their keywords for all your competitors and downloading that. And then you can put in your keyword and then look at the variations that is in SEMrush or Ahrefs database, and then download all those. And you'll have the information for all of them. So if you're looking to save, just doing it all up front and downloading the information is a good way to go.
Got it. Sign up, use it for all your research, cancel like the HBO subscription. Got it.
There you go.
Yeah. Can you, how does the use of categories and tags in WordPress affect SEO?
Yeah, so they specifically with categories, they can help organize your content much more easily, which can help users filter through your blog. When you create like categories, they'll create category pages. So for example, we're a digital marketing agency. We'll have categories for SEO, Google Ads, hosting. So you're just assigning all your blogs to those categories is a good step. And then if someone wants resources only on SEO, they can go to your SEO categories page. I personally think you should index your category pages. Some people say don't. I personally am, that's my belief. There's a lot of different opinions on the categories and tags, but I think it does provide value, and I'd rather have that link equity be passed on to those posts, and it creates better hierarchy for your website as well.
A question came in. What is a reasonable time to wait to see if a page is ranking? Is there a rule of thumb?
Yeah, so if like Forbes.com were to post a blog today, it would rank like today or tomorrow, because they're just such a highly authoritative website. But if a brand new site were to post something, it would take much longer. It might take like upwards of a month or two even. So it really depends on your website authority and how relevant the information is. Maybe if it's like more news related. So I would say like if you make a post, give it like 2 weeks, and then you can also submit it to Google Search Console for indexing, and then you can also link it from other pages on your website, which is a best practice anyways. So just like adding, if you're talking about certain statistics in your niche, maybe on another blog, you can add a link like read more or some sort of anchor text that links to your new page. And that'll help search engines pick it up sooner as well, and it can speed up the indexing time.
Last time you talked about optimizing images for SEO. It was your general recommendation to also do that. Can you explain how to optimize images for SEO on a WordPress site?
Yeah, so there's on the WordPress site, and then there's still stuff you can do off the WordPress site. So compressing your images would be good. You can use an app, a website like Squoosh, I think it's called, or Squoosh, to compress your images to the correct size, because you don't want it too big, because that can really slow down your website speed. And then download it, and then make sure you use a descriptive file name. So if it's a woman on the beach, just use woman on the beach as your file name. Or you can make it keyword focused as well, as long as it's accurate. And then when you get your WordPress site and you upload the image, there should be settings. If you use like the Gutenberg editor for the alt tag or alt text, make sure that you put your keywords in there. Don't over optimize, and don't like be non-descriptive of your image. So again, if it's a woman on the beach, just put woman on the beach as your alt text, because there's no point in trying to go for a different keyword, because it's not really relevant. But just there should be an alt text field in WordPress for your page builder, especially. They should all have one.
A question from a client. Does Google care if blogs are created by AI?
A great question. I actually don't think they technically care. For example, if I were to write something like a blog about SEO, like the AI could almost it could probably write better than I can. So it's like, at the end of the day, if it's providing the user value with good information, better than what I can do even, then why would Google not want to show that to their audience? But I definitely have seen many websites rank using AI only. There have been other sites that have ranked for a bit and then crashed. So when you use AI, I would recommend using it for like, it's kind of like the 80-20 rule. Do a lot with it, but then make sure you're still applying like the human touch to it. It's not an out of the box solution, no matter what anyone says or any software tools say. You still need to make sure that the sentences are formatted for a person who for your audience basically. You'll find that a lot of times, like if it creates multiple paragraphs, they'll like end the paragraph with the same kind of tone or like word. That's like not good for the user. So you just kind of want to make sure you're changing that and just making sure that the content is for the user at the end of the day. Just put yourself in their shoes and ask yourself if you kind of enjoy reading this.
We're quickly running out of time. One more question. How can beginners track their SEO performance on their WordPress site?
Yeah. So Google Search Console is number one, and Google Analytics as well, getting those installed. And you can integrate those pretty easily with a plugin like Yoast, or you can just add them to your theme files. I don't know, we never really use any analytics tracking that's integrated into WordPress. We always keep it external with Google Search Console or Google Analytics. So I don't know anything about like the specific analytics dashboard for like a plugin on WordPress, but just Google Search Console and Google Analytics are the perfect for beginners for sure.
Thank you, Corey. As we wrap up, I want to extend my sincerest gratitude to our brilliant speakers, Kirsten, Pavel, Corey, for sharing their invaluable tips and insights about WordPress. Your expertise has undoubtedly empowered our clients and myself to navigate the WordPress platform with increased understanding and confidence. To our attendees, thank you for engaging questions and active participation. It's your curiosity and eagerness to learn that makes these events so satisfying to host. So let's continue to learn and grow together in our subsequent webinars. Until next time, stay safe and keep exploring WordPress. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.